And for more on what is always a difficult day, we say hello to CBS lead NFL insider Jonathan Jones. He's got two of them, and so does the other. Bryant McFadden, our two-time champ, joins us. JJ, the PR in the wake of these dismissals is always interesting, always feels like there's something to be learned from it. The Browns brass is where we'll start asserting that the fan base deserves better, but I'm sure Browns fans feel like that's an organizational reflection, not just one of the head coach. What's the latest word out of Cleveland?
Yeah, these press conferences, really, you can't win them, right? You only hope to not lose them. You're firing a head coach, someone who, however many years ago you hired that head coach, you believed was going to bring a sustained winner, was going to be able to bring in world championships over and over. But instead, what you wind up getting is this sort of press conference. So there is no winning in it. We have to understand that. Meanwhile, what is next for the Cleveland Browns? Well, they're keeping general manager Andrew Berry, and he is going to lead the search for the next head coach. And that head coach is probably going to be a first-time head coach, because I don't know how necessarily desirable this job is going to be there in Cleveland. You have Shedeur Sanders, who is likely to be the Week 1 starter in 2026. There are plenty of holes on this roster. The salary cap isn't all that great, but you do have a personnel group that proved, at least this past year, that they know how to draft some guys. And so with their draft picks that they have, remember, of course, they have the first-round pick from the Jacksonville Jaguars as well. There is some sliver of hope that things can get better, but a playoff appearance anytime soon, boy, that just feels so far away.
It feels like the Cleveland Browns will be in the midst of a rebuild for a few years until they get this thing back on track. And it starts with whoever the new head coach will be and the staff that he assembles around him. But, JJ, you hit on it. It's not desirable at all. I mean, if you're in your 30s to 40s, all you have known the Cleveland Browns to be consistently has been bad, right? Going since 1989. Since 1989 until 2007, they had 2 double-digit win seasons. From 1989 to 2007, only 2 double-digit win seasons. Kevin Stefanski, throughout his time there, he had 2. In those 2 years, he won Coach of the Year. So one would say Kevin Stefanski kind of did more with less, and understanding and knowing when you coach the Cleveland Browns, it's not just about your mindset, your football mindset. You're always kind of looking over your shoulder at ownership as well, because they've shown the ability to dib and dab into football-related business. And I don't know if you're a credible coach, do you want to walk into that situation when you know you don't have the full arsenal in terms of what your word would say, knowing that you have to look over your shoulder. So we have to wait and see. But I agree with you, JJ. I think whoever the new head coach will be, it will be a guy who's just hungry to be a first-time head coach, and he probably won't have any previous head coaching experience.
And nor the arsenal of cap space like we often see when it's a rookie quarterback on that sort of contract that allows you to build a team around it. They have 2 rookie quarterbacks this season and 1 veteran quarterback who didn't play but still guaranteed all that money. It's a murky situation there. We head over to Vegas, where John Spytek said that the 7-time champion broadcaster and minority owner Tom Brady going to play a somewhat significant role in the next moves in Las Vegas. JJ, it's a non-traditional structuring there, but invaluable experience, neither silver nor black, maybe more of a gray area when it comes to what Brady has been responsible for to this point. But can we say from this point moving forward that the success, or failure does to some extent belong to Brady?
Yeah, I'm actually a little surprised by the quote-unquote news today that Tom Brady is going to be heavily involved in the football operations and heavily involved in choosing the next head coach. We all said that last year. Like, it's weird to me that because they had such a terrible year that now Tom Brady is getting more involved. I want to take you back to last year when Tom Brady got approved to be a minority owner in the NFL. I'm literally feet away from Mark Davis asking him about Tom Brady's role, and Mark Davis is more or less saying that he's going to let Tom Brady run the football operations, that he's going to listen to Tom Brady, the 7-time Super Bowl champion. And then what did we get when we got to January after they fired Antonio Pierce and Tom Telesco, was that Tom Brady was in and helping conduct almost every interview, hours worth of interviews with dozens of candidates Tom Brady was heavily involved in. And that resulted in Pete Carroll, and that resulted in this one-and-done season. And so there's, I think, this idea that's kind of floating around that, he was kind of learning the ropes, but he wasn't all that involved, and look what happened. Now you got to get Tom involved. Tom was very involved. Tom's fingerprints were all over this last year. It has been a collective failure, but there should be no absolution for Tom Brady, who was extremely, massively a part of all this. And I don't want there to be any sort of revisionist history that may be taking place in statements issued by the Raiders or press conferences taking place on Monday.
Just because you were a great player, one of the best to ever do it, doesn't mean you would be a great manager of a roster. Doesn't mean you would be a great assembler of putting together a solid foundation. And to your point, JJ, that's what we saw, because Tom Brady's hands were heavily involved in bringing in Pete Carroll, like you mentioned. What about Geno Smith? He had a hand to play in Geno Smith for them making the move to bring in Geno Smith, and that relationship did not work out in 2024. Now, granted, it wasn't all on Geno Smith. There was a lot of things that led to that disappointment in terms of production, but that was the major move that Tom Brady and this new front office made in terms of the personnel. So now what is next? This is a pivotal year for all parties involved, especially hearing that Tom Brady will now be heavily involved with this situation for the Raiders because they have the #1 pick and they have money to play with. So you have to turn this roster over in a very, very fast way because they lack talent, they lack experience, and they're playing in a division that next year, when fully healthy, will be extremely competitive. When you look at what the Denver Broncos are currently doing, the same could be said with the Chargers, and potentially having a healthy Pat Mahomes and heavily motivated Kansas City Chiefs organization down the pipe as well.
Yeah, it's not a situation suited for a top overall pick quarterback to come in and succeed right away. You got to get more dudes in the building to help whoever is going to take the reins over for Geno Smith. Elsewhere, Jonathan Gannon out in AZ, and when assessing this opening, I guess first line of the fact sheet would be the $46 million quarterback that comes with the house, JJ. How does Kyler's contract affect what might transpire next for the Cardinals?
So whoever the next head coach is going to be, there's going to be an interview process. And I don't just mean that Michael Bidwell and general manager Monty Ossenford are going to be interviewing head coaching candidates, Joe and BMAC. I mean that these head coaching candidates are going to have an interview for the owner and the GM. They need to know who their quarterback is going to be. They need to know what the plan is. Of course, they're going to come in with their own vision, and maybe they lay out how they can work with Kyler. And hey, I've watched every single snap of his dating back to Little League, and I can tell you exactly what he needs. Or, hey guys, what are you planning to do? Are you cutting bait with him? What is our plan? Is it going to be a veteran? Are we looking to get a rookie in somehow? So that is going to be absolutely crucial. That is what is going to be sort of the collaborative process, because there is a world, there is a reality based upon the money that you mentioned, Joe, that Kyler Murray remains in Arizona in 2026. Consider that teams aren't going to be jumping to go trade for him. Consider that Arizona doesn't want to just cut him for nothing and then let some team pick him up on the veteran minimum as they pay him out to play for someone else. So there is a possibility that Kyler Murray remains in Arizona. There is a possibility that he is their best option there. But that's what this head coaching interview process is ultimately going to determine. Who has the best plan? Who has the best vision for Kyler Murray? And or who has the best vision to move on from the Kyler Murray era finally in Arizona?
And because of that, JJ, when we just spoke about the Raiders and their new potential destination with their new head coach. With the Arizona Cardinals, I think this destination is less desirable than the Raiders because of everything you mentioned. Whoever the new head coach will be coming in, he will either be forced to work with Kyler because they can't move on from him in that contract, or he'll be forced to work with an unknown prospect at the quarterback position who might not be as talented as a Kyler Murray. So whoever comes into this situation, they got to be willing to handle either or. And in the NFC West, that is the wrong division to have question marks at the quarterback spot, because you're playing against Brock Purdy twice a year, Sam Darnold twice a year, Matthew Stafford twice a year. And outside of that, those quarterback competitions that you will see twice a year, look at the coaching pedigree in the NFC West as well. We don't see any of those organizations, 3 organizations, slowing down anytime soon when you look at the coaching that they have at the highs of the heights, not to mention the quarterback play.
It's a long way to go for Arizona, and it starts with the hiring of a new head coach here after Monday's news. Gentlemen, thank you. As we did also get a statement from Kyler Murray after Jonathan Gannon's dismissal. Tweeted, "My guy, genuinely loved going to war with you. Appreciate who you are as a man and a coach. Warpath." Back on CBS Sports HQ, where Monday we learned the Giants are sticking with Joe Schoen as their general manager. Schoen was hired alongside Brian Daboll prior to the 2022 season. Daboll dismissed after a 2-8 start this year. The Giants went on to win their final 2 regular season games to finish 4-13 and will pick 5th in the NFL draft. Team owners John Mara and Steve Tisch released the following statement on Monday, reading, quote, "Joe Schoen will remain our general manager and continue to lead our football operations and search for our next head coach. Continuity and stability in the front office is important to our progress. We believe in our young core of talent, which we can build around for future success," end quote. Jonathan Jones and Bryant McFadden back in the fold with more reaction. And while some go addition by subtraction, on Monday others go addition by retention, if you will. JJ, what can you tell us about the internal dealings in East Rutherford that ultimately lead to Joe Schoen getting another bite at the apple?
Look, I want to be clear. There are a number of general managers who have had the record of Joe Schoen who would not be making it into another season, right? There is enough there, and there is enough history that we have seen in the NFL that would warrant a firing. But he remains. And why is that? Look, I can't necessarily speak for ownership of the New York Giants, but it is clear to me via sources that they trust Joe Schoen. They believe in him. They want him to run this next head coaching search. Remember, he and Brian Daboll were a bit of a package deal. They came in from Buffalo together. So has he really, truly run a full coaching search? Not really. Of course, there have been mistakes and missteps along the way for Joe Schoen. There have also been some pretty good pickups in the draft, and I don't think anyone can argue that. And Jackson Dart finally started to look a little bit more like himself. We're not going to get into whether the Giants should have won or lost down the stretch at the end. The fact is that he looked decent at quarterback and played well at quarterback with a lot of guys down around him. And so the thought is that they're building something. Malik Neighbors is back next year. Andrew Thomas is back next year. Cam Scatterbo is back next year. They will continue to add, and that hopefully in an NFC East that up until this year, any team could win. If you won it the previous year, you weren't going to win it the next year. The hope there is that they can get it figured out. But the last point that I would make is it is not all that common that a lame duck general manager being paired with a new head coach works out all that well. If it does with the Giants, it will be a rare occurrence.
You talked about the privilege that Joe Schoen has still remaining there in place as the general manager for the New York Giants with his record. Well, you didn't give us what his record is. I will provide that information for our viewers. Joe Schoen record since being the GM for the Giants that he's tied to, 22-45-1. 22-45-1. And they feel like he's done a good job hitting on some picks. No question. Malik Neighbors, when healthy, I think he's a high-level wide receiver. When you talk about Cam Scatterbo, when healthy, I think he's going to be a big asset to what they do in running the football and just the mindset that he plays with. But what about some of the misses, right? Let's go back to a 2022 draft. Right, you had 2 first-round picks. Kayvon Thibodeau, you took with the first one. He looks like he's shown some flashes here or there, but clearly he's no bust. But with your second first-round pick, you took Evan Neal. A few picks later, Charles Cross came off the board. Charles Cross just got a massive deal from the Seattle Seahawks because he's considered one of the best tackles in the game. Evan Neal has he hasn't come anywhere close to the player that Charles Cross is. What about in 2023? When you look at that draft, you took Deonte Banks late in the first round. That hasn't worked out the way you thought it would be. Not to mention Jalen Hyatt. Remember, Joe Schoen wanted to take Jalen Hyatt in the second round. Oddly enough, he fell in the third round, and they took him. But that was a pick he was extremely high on. So for the Giants, I feel like they're being lazy and not just doing a total reset. Because if Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, they were tied to the hip, why fire one and keep the other? That doesn't make sense.
That's just it. The idea of player acquisition and player development being two different things. Development answers for the failures. Acquisition, whether it be good, bad, or somewhere in between, not having to answer for it just yet. The Bengals also staying put with their head man and their top executive. Zac Taylor addressed the media on Monday.
We are on a path to really good things next year. And I think everybody that exited this building today feels that, players, coaches, everybody involved with this thing. And that this season was a disappointment. It didn't go the way we wanted. But I'm already re-energized to get working on 2026 and get back to work. Doesn't mean I won't take a couple days, but I just feel like the energy of this group and the talent we have and the progress a lot of these guys made, that we've got a chance to be back in the conversation of where we belong these last couple of years and have fallen short of that. And so I'm excited, and I feel the excitement of all of our players and coaches to get back to that.
All right, I'll give you energy and talent, but progress, I don't know if we saw that this season. It was literally one of the worst defensive seasons by any team anywhere ever. What's the old adage about insanity? Doing the same, expecting different. Jonathan Jones, how does this duo in Cincinnati, responsible for just that, finally start producing these results?
Well, they have to start faster, right? And they did appear to start faster this season. That was the thing that plagued all of Zac Taylor's teams with the Bengals. They were always 0-2 or 1-3. Well, they started 2-0. But of course, Joe Burrow goes out with that turf toe injury. They had misplaced trust, hope, and faith in Jake Browning, and the season started to get away from them, and then they couldn't recover there at the end. We've seen this a couple of times now with the Cincinnati Bengals, with more missed playoffs there that we see than any sort of playoff success. Look, this is an organization that does not like to pay people to not work for them. I am not at all surprised that Zac Taylor remains as the head coach. I think that he's done a fantastic job offensively, and I think some of the proof there is looking at what Joe Flacco did, for example, in Cleveland, and then seeing what Joe Flacco did in Cincinnati. Same person, same age, all those things, and he looked like a completely different quarterback. That helped Zac Taylor, and Duke Tobin has been in that organization. He's the de facto GM for more than a quarter century. But Al Golden remaining as defensive coordinator, and sort of a fire that probably needs to be lit under Duke Tobin and the personnel staff to get better defensive personnel. I'm not willing to call Shamar Stewart a bust. I don't think that anyone after just 1 year should call someone a bust, but he has to do more than that. They were missing Trey Hendrickson for a lot of the season. The defense clearly was an issue. And so it seemed like that they figured out under Zac Taylor how to get off to a faster start this year, something that had plagued them for years. But then it was the defense. And so it was like you turn a knob here and then you got to twist something over here. Hopefully they get that figured out in the offseason. But I certainly understand fans who may think, gosh, really? Running it back just like this? No changes? I don't know about that.
Hey, like you said, JJ, if you've been a fan of the NFL and been following all the teams like we have collectively, you're not surprised that Cincinnati is keeping everybody in place because they're too cheap of an organization to fire anyone, like you said, to pay them. This is the same organization that was too cheap to pay volunteers to shovel snow for the upcoming game for that Sunday, where the fans who paid to watch their team play had to sit in snow, or they had to kick snow out of their seats. Who does that? Who does that in the NFL? But that's another topic of discussion. But I agree with everything you said, JJ. I'm not surprised. And for Cincinnati, they're just doing the same thing. When you look at the money they spent all on the offensive side. There's no surprise that the offense, when healthy, has been able to score points. But the defense, remember, Al Golden came in, and he was supposed to provide a sense of a spark for their defense. Remember how bad their defense was last year in 2024. Well, in 2025, they were actually worse. They allowed 28 points this season. That was 30th in the National Football League. Viewers that are not really involved in the NFL, there are only 32 teams in the National Football League. So if you're 30, you're at the bottom of the bottom. Last year in 2024, they were 25th. They allowed 25 points per ball game, which is a better number than what they allowed this year in 2025. I'll go 1 year further. 2023, they were actually better. They only allowed 22 points. that season, which was 21st in the National Football League. So these numbers defensively, they've declined. They've got worse and worse and worse. And if you can't stop anybody, I can care less with how many Joe Burrows and Jamar Chase you have on the offensive end. You cannot outscore people in the National Football League if you cannot get timely stops. I don't see that changing anytime soon because they can't identify quality sound talent on the defensive side to be able to play a tad bit better for them to be a competent organization.
We just chalk it up to fiscal responsibility. Paying top rate for the quarterback, the wide receiver 1, and the wide receiver 2, top of market, not as fiscally responsible as these other moves. We did have one earlier to market with an in-season firing at the Tennessee Titans. What's the latest we've heard on their search, the upcoming hire? And we did see some names lined up for interviews recently here, JJ.
Yeah, they were the first to fire a head coach. Remember, they fired Brian Callahan midway through the season, so they've been prepared. And they put in a number of interview request slips earlier today. Those interviews can begin as early as Wednesday. One of the names that you're going to hear plenty about is Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator Matt Nagy, and we see the list right here. He obviously has a relationship with the general manager, Mike Borgonzi, who had spent many years with the Kansas City Chiefs before being hired in Tennessee last year. Another name to keep an eye out for, Vance Joseph, had been told that he would get a good, strong look there in Tennessee. Lou Anarumo, a defensive coordinator, and of course, Kevin Stefanski is someone who's going to have a lot of looks from a number of teams. This is a Titans organization that needs someone to help usher Cam Ward and help him along and be better. In year 2, he got great news about his shoulder. By the way, that was a scary-looking injury with him with the sling. I know the three of us were watching it together, really concerned about that. Should be fine. But this is also a Titans organization that just hired in Brian Callahan, a first-time head coach. And not just that, but someone who hadn't called offensive plays before, dating back to his time with the Cincinnati Bengals. This feels like a team that needs veteran leadership. Right? Typically, teams do the opposite of what they just fired anyway, but this especially feels like a team that they're going to be trying to build through the draft, that they're going to have a lot of young guys. You don't want someone who hasn't been there before necessarily navigating this at the helm. And so even a Lou Anarumo, who would be a first-time head coach but has been around the block so much, I think they should feel comfortable and confident moving forward with him. But any of these hot, young, up-and-comers who NFL fans maybe didn't hear about until 18 months ago, 12 months ago, or even this season, I don't see them being a real legitimate contender in Tennessee for this cycle.
The carousel begins to spin, and Jonathan Jones, Bryant, McFadden, I'm always interested in your points of view on this. Last year, it was a hot topic as you had some young, talented quarterbacks with coaching vacancies at the top of their teams. The most attractive vacancy, Bryant McFadden, in your eyes, is where this offseason?
It's the Atlanta Falcons. It's the Atlanta Falcons. Now, I know they will not have their 2026 first-round selection because that goes to the Los Angeles Rams this year. But the reason why I believe the Atlanta Falcons, they're the most desirable destination that's available right now is because of the winnable division that they're in the NFC South. The Atlanta Falcons finished with a record of 8-9. That is the same identical record as the winner of the division in the Carolina Panthers. Carolina finished with the same identical record. If Atlanta, with as bad as they were this season, if they happen to win either the Miami Dolphin game, the New York Jets game, or one of the Carolina games, any one of those games, or even first week against Tampa when they missed the game-winning field goal, if they happen to win any one of those games, they would have won the division. So if you're a up-and-coming coach, and you have an opportunity to go to a spot like Atlanta, you got to look in the neighborhood. Because if you're a first-time home buyer, you don't go to a neighborhood where the houses are too expensive or you can't keep up with the HOA fees. You got to go what fits your pocket. So if you're a first-time head coach, I want to go live in that NFC South neighborhood because those houses, they're not expensive like what's going on in the NFC West, where it's super competitive, or the AFC West, where it's super competitive, the NFC North, where it's super competitive. It's a winnable division, and they have young pieces already in place. You got a wide receiver 1 in Drake London. You got an RB1 in Bijan Robinson. You got, when healthy, when you got 2 bookend tackles in Matthews and McGarry, not to mention Lindstrom in the interior. You look at the young studs on the defensive side. James Pierce, double-digit sacks. Look at Jalen Walker, what he did. Watts in the backfield at the safety position. They got pieces.
Can I just, what about the quarterback?
We'll figure that out. But heck, Joe, the last time I checked, they almost won the division with Kirk Cousins filling in for Michael Penix.
All great points. Jonathan Jones, in your eyes, best vacancy.
Look, BMAC makes a lot of great points there, and I think the Falcons among these teams is certainly up there. Also, let's be clear, you fired your head coach. A lot of these teams were in bad ways, so they aren't great jobs, right? So we're being relative here. The top job for me, it always comes down to two things, two main things, right? And this is how I rank teams. It is, do you have good ownership and do you have a quarterback? You can rank those any which way you want, but for me, it is the New York Giants. You clearly have a patient owner in the New York Giants with John Mara and Steve Tisch, right? We just talked about Joe Schoen. A lot of places he wouldn't have even gotten another year. He has with the Giants. So you have the patience of ownership there. And yes, could be a lame duck GM. I'm not saying there aren't drawbacks to the job, whatever. But we just talked about quarterback. Jackson Dart, perhaps going to finish top 5, top 3 in offensive rookie of the year voting. Looks like he may have something there, right? A lot of these teams, the Browns, you don't know what's going to happen with the Cardinals at quarterback. The list will go on, but you do feel good right now about the guy who's on a rookie contract and will be cost controlled for at least the next 2 years in Jackson Dart. So again, it comes down to ownership. It comes down to quarterback for me. And when you put all of those two together and really rank them, right, because Atlanta does have great ownership, you don't know about the quarterback. So for me, it's the New York Giants.
Jonathan Jones and Bryant McFadden continuing to bring you the latest across the NFL. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, here's a look at those official head coaching openings. The Giants, Falcons, Browns, Raiders, and Cardinals. Exciting action here on Monday. The Titans an in-season firing as we will spin that carousel and see where they eventually land.